with a gun, don't just pull out your gun and start shooting. Find cover, yell out some commands, because the department is becoming more and more diverse. We're starting to look more and more like perps. So while trying to warn us about implicit bias, he used implicit bias. And, that's to show you how implicit it is. But to answer the first part of the question, this type of treatment is in academia, it's called reasonable racism, right? Or rational discrimination. The idea that because Black, when it comes to certain violent crimes, that it's justified to treat the entire demographic as suspicious, but that's discrimination 101. Because the people, be it Black or brown, that are involved in this violence, it's still just a smidgen of the entire population of Black and brown people. So it just doesn't make sense to treat an entire demographic this way. But when you dissect the policies, that's what's at the foundation of a lot of it. Is it on purpose? Is it implicit? That's up, for question. But that's where it becomes systemic racism, because despite of how certain policies are written on the face, the expectation is that this treatment is for Black and brown folks.
And is there amongst any of the people who sort of buy into that notion that it's reasonable to be discriminatory in this way? Let's put aside whatever is in their head in terms of it's easy for them to do because they may have already some strong racist inclinations or whatnot. But just in terms of like, based on that, how much of a goes into the calculation of we are criminalizing an entire group of people, despite the fact that, with the intent of finding a much smaller group of people embedded within those people. How much of that sort of like notion of what's the cost associated with, focusing our policing specifically targeted at this demographic?
Honestly, Sam, I don't think it ever crosses their minds. I think they're so hyper focused on the end goal that they don't care about the way we get there, which is why they're willing to come up with unconstitutional policy. And this is part of the dehumanizing of certain groups, because I've watched officers, the most callous officers, when we're in other neighborhoods, be it for a parade or something else, and they're dealing with different demographics, a complete other side of them comes out. All of a sudden, the callous enforcer isn't there. And I realize what they're able to do is they can relate to these other folks more. And that's why they get more of a human response, not this, robotic, ones and zeros, just hyper focused on technicalities, etc., petty arrests and innocuous infractions. That's what's been missing from the policy, the human aspect of it. Because again, they're just not able to relate. And even though police departments, because what they'll say is this is the most diverse the police force has ever been. But something I always challenge is cosmetic diversity versus diversity of thought. Because honestly, I don't care if an entire police force is white. If I'm being treated, like a human being, and I'm not being violated and harassed and racially profiled, I'll be fine with that. Now, granted, there should be a job opportunities for others if they so wish to join law enforcement. But the idea that just because we have Black and brown folks, women, folks who are part of the LGBTQ community in uniform, that the department is all of a sudden no longer engaging in discrimination, it's foolish, because they don't sit down with those respective groups and say, traditionally, this is how we've been detrimental to these groups. What can we do better? They don't do that part. It's just be happy that you are of that community and we gave you a job.
So, okay, so you've got these recordings where it's clear that your career is being inhibited by the fact that you won't do something that at that juncture, or maybe a little bit later, has been found to be unconstitutional, or should say, has been found to be unconstitutional, but is supposedly not happening in the police department. At what point do you decide to join this class action suit? And who are your co-plaintiffs?
Yeah, so it's around March of 2015. I attended a press conference where some of the other officers were exposing evidence to make it clear that there were quotas in a particular precinct and the lawyers were there. I spoke to the lawyers. I said, "Hey, I have some ammunition that can help this fight," referring to the recordings. But after we met, he then asked me to be the lead plaintiff, which at first I was hesitant to do because that's not what that wasn't the reason that I wanted to meet with him. But I spoke to some mentors and supporters, and after that, I signed on, became the lead plaintiff. And yeah, it was we. There were a few other plaintiffs that were signed up to join the lawsuit. It became 12 of us altogether. That in the media we've been referred to as the NYPD 12.
And so, what was the specific thing that you were suing about as a class? Like, what was the all people who had been inhibited from rising in their careers within the police department? Is that what the nature of it was?
Well, yeah. So it was 12 of us, all of us black and brown. We all faced retaliation that um, so the quota was expected of all police officers, but when it came time for retaliation, black and brown cops got it the worst, and that was the discriminatory part. Also, our First Amendment. Once we become whistleblowers, um, once we use our voice and exercise our First Amendment, we shouldn't face retaliation from the government, which we're government employees, so we're facing retaliation. And then the 14th Amendment, which is, equal protection. Because we're policing so differently in different parts of the city and we're being reprimanded for not doing that, these are all things that were made up the entire lawsuit.
Where was your union? Like, did you guys ever go to your union? My perspective on the police union's a little bit jaundiced in this way. What was the union response?
Great question, because technically, when 11 members, one was a detective, that's a different union. When 11 members of your union take a public stance like this, you don't have a choice as a union. You shouldn't have a choice as to whether or not you're going to support them. Unfortunately, and this is where the culture of policing, particularly the parallels with the Cosa Nostra, this is where this comes in. We were seen as rats, right, as snitches. So it would actually hurt the optics of supporting us would hurt the union boss because within the culture of the blue wall of the police, he'd be supporting rats. And that's the reason why behind the scenes, he said, once this thing goes to court and, we're subpoenaed, it is what it is. But to take initiative to support us, that would make them essentially rats for supporting rats. So unfortunately, the union was not there the way they were supposed to be because of the mafioso culture of the NYPD.
And what was ultimately the outcome of the lawsuit?
I hate to say this, but in July of last year, it took 7 years for the judge to make a decision, but she essentially dismissed it from her courtroom. But we've since refiled in state court, and the department tried to get it dismissed, which the judge denied. But then they filed for summary judgment, essentially, one last attempt to get it dismissed. And I think as soon as next week the judge makes a decision, we have obviously submitted rebuttals. The judge is going to go through everything, check the case law, everything we reference, and we find out whether or not we move forward with trial in probably about a week. So it's been over 8 years. There are people who have started this fight, fellow activists who are no longer here with us, like some of them passed from COVID, etc. It's been a long journey, and we're still